Hi guys, this is Bedtime Stories with Luna the Illest Witch. That is Adult Bedtime Stories, of course, with me, Luna the Illest Witch. We are going to be reading tonight The Secret History of the World by Mark Booth. I'm going to be skipping the introduction because I read it earlier in the bath and it was a little dry to me. Not really. I guess it was a little bit important, but it moved slowly. So we're gonna skip it. You guys can let me know in the comments if we want to return to it maybe, but we're going to go right to chapter 1, alright? So while I am turning back from my bookmark and all that jazz, why don't you guys hit the subscribe button if you're not already a part of the Illust family. Ring that bell so you don't miss my next video. We're going to be doing a lot of pick a card readings, techniques and manifestation, and all that other witchy stuff, making sigils and even making vision boards. Very helpful, okay? Let's see. So I'm going to go back a little bit. Okay, so this is, how do you guys like my Breaking Bad bear? Alright, this is Bedtime Stories with Luna, the Illest Witch. Adult Bedtime Stories, that is. And we are reading The Secret History of the World by Mark Booth. Alright, get comfy, guys. Chapter 1. In the beginning, God peers at his reflection, the looking glass universe. This is already awesome, guys. This is why I wanted to read this too, alright? Alright. Once upon a time, there was no time at all. Time is nothing but a measure of the changing positions of objects in space, and as any scientist, mystic, or madman knows, in the beginning there were no objects in space. For example, a year is a measurement of the movement of the Earth around the Sun. A day is the revolving of the Earth on its axis. Since by its own account neither earth nor sun existed in the beginning, the authors of the Bible never meant to say that everything was created in 7 days, in the usual sense of a day. Despite this initial absence of matter, space, and time, something must have happened to get everything started. In other words, something must have happened before there was anything. Since there was no thing, when something first happened, it is safe to say that the first thing happening must have been quite different from the sorts of events we regularly account for in terms of the laws of physics. Might it make sense to say that first happening could have been in some ways more like a mental event than a physical event? The idea of mental events generating physical effects may at first seem counterintuitive, but in fact, it's something we experience all the time. For example, what happens when I'm struck by an idea, such as, I just have to reach out and stroke her cheek? Is that a pulse jumps a synapse in my brain? Something like an electrical current burns down a nerve in my arm and my hand moves? Can this everyday example tell us anything about the origins of the cosmos? In the beginning, an impulse must have come from somewhere, but where? As children, we didn't all feel wonder when we first saw crystals precipitating in the bottom of a solution as if an impulse were squeezing out of one dimension into the next. In this history, we shall see how for many of the world's most brilliant individuals, the birth of the universe, the mysterious transition from no matter to matter, has been explained in just such a way. They have envisaged an impulse squeezing out of another dimension into this one, and they have conceived of this other dimension as the mind of God. That escalated quickly. Just saying. While you are still on the threshold, and before you risk wasting any more time on this history, I must make it plain that I am going to try to persuade you to consider something which may be all right by a mystic or a madman, but which a scientist will not like. A scientist will not like it at all. Great. I'm literally a scientist. I go to Albany for chemistry. I'm also a madman and a mystic, too. Let's see. To today's most advanced thinkers, academics like Richard Dawkins, the Charles Simonyi Professor of the Public Understanding of Science at Oxford, and the other militant materialists who regulate and maintain the scientific worldview, the mind of God is no better than the idea of a white-haired old man up above the clouds. It is the same mistake, they say, that children and primitive tribes make when they assume God must be like them. The anthropomorphic fallacy. Even if we allowed that God might conceivably exist, they say, why on earth should he be like us? Why should his mind be in any way like ours? The fact is, they're right. Of course there's no reason at all, unless it's the other way around. In other words, the only reason why my cat. In other words, the only reason why God's mind might be like ours is if ours was made to be like his, that is, if God made us in his image. In other words, the only reason why God's mind might be like ours is if ours was made to be like his, that is, if God made us in his image. Woo, full circle. And this is what happens in this book, because in this history, everything is the other way around. Everything here is upside down and inside out. In the pages that follow, you will be invited to think the last things that the people who guard and maintain the consensus want you to think. You will be tempted to think forbidden thoughts and taste philosophies that the intellectual leaders of our age believe to be heretical, stupid, and mad. Let me quickly reassure you that I'm going to try to embroil you in academic debate to try to persuade you by a physiological argument that any of these forbidden ideas are right. The formal arguments for and against can be found in the standard academic works, but what I am going to do is ask you to stretch your imagination. Look, they have this picture here, the Alice in Wonderland, okay? Says Alice enters the other way round universe. Cool. They literally just compared Alice in Wonderland, where everything is what it shouldn't be and shouldn't be what it is, or upside down and up around. Like, why would God's mind be like ours, unless that is if ours is like his, if we were made in his image. Our universe is Wonderland, and we complain. Alright, back to Mark Booth. I want you to imagine what it would feel like to see the world and its history from a point of view that is about as far away from the one you've been taught as it is to possibly get. Our most advanced thinkers would be horrified and would certainly advise you against toying with their ideas in any way at all, let alone dwelling on them for the time it will take to read this book. There has been a concerted attempt to erase from the universe all memory, every last trace of these ideas. Today's intellectual elite believes that if we let these ideas slip back into the imagination, even briefly, we risk being dragged back into an aboriginal or atavistic form of consciousness, a mental slime from which we had to struggle over many millennia to evolve. So, in this story, what did happen before time? What was the primal mental event? In this story, God reflected on himself. He looked as it were into an imaginary mirror and saw the future. He imagined beings very like himself. He imagined free, creative beings capable of loving so intelligently and thinking so lovingly that they could transform themselves, expand their minds to embrace the totality of the cosmos, and in the depths of their hearts they could discern, too, the secrets of its subtlest workings. Put yourself into God's position. Involve self into God's position involves imagining that you are staring at your reflection in a mirror. You are willing the image of yourself you see there to come alive and take on its own independent life. As we shall see in the following chapters in the Looking Glass, history taught by the secret societies, this is exactly what God did. His reflections, humans, gradually and in stages, forming and achieving independent life, nurtured by him, guided and prompted by him over very long periods. Today's scientists will tell you that in the hour of your greatest anguish, there is no point in crying out to the heavens with any expression of our deepest, most heartfelt feelings, because you will find no answering resonance there. The stars can show you only indifference. The human task is to grow up, to mature, to learn to come to terms with this indifference. The universe that this book describes is different because it was made with humankind in mind. In this history, the universe is anthropocentric, every single particle of its straining directed towards humankind. The universe has nurtured us through the millennia, cradled us, helped the unique thing that is human consciousness to evolve, and guided each of us as individuals toward the great moments in our lives. When you cry out, the universe turns towards you in sympathy. When you approach one of life's greatest crossroads, the whole universe holds its breath to see which way you will choose. Scientists may talk of the mystery and wonder of the universe, of every single particle in it being connected to every other particle by the pull of gravity. They may point out amazing facts, such as that each and every one of us contains millions of atoms that were once in the body of Julius Caesar. They may say we are stardust, but only in the slightly disappointing sense that the atoms we are made of were forged from hydrogen in stars that exploded long before our solar system was formed. Because the important point is this, however, they deck it out with the rhetoric of mystery and wonder, theirs is a universe of blind force. In the scientific universe, matter came before mind. Mind is an accident of matter, inessential and extraneous to matter, as one scientist went so far to describe it, a disease of matter. On the other hand, in the mind before matter universe that this book describes, the connection between mind and matter is much more intimate. It is a living dynamic connection. Everything in this universe is alive and conscious to some degree, responding sensitively and intelligently to our deepest, subtlest needs. In this mind, before matter universe, not only did matter emerge from the mind of God, but it was created in order to provide the conditions in which the human mind would be possible. Moreover, the human mind is still the focus of the cosmos, nurturing it and responding to its needs. Matter is therefore moved by human minds, perhaps not to the same extent, but in the same kind of way that it is moved by the mind of God. In 1935, the Austrian physicist Erwin Schrodinger formulated his famous theoretical experiment, Schrodinger's cat. Oh God, Schrodinger's cat, man. That's a trip. That cat in a box. That's Schrodinger. Schrodinger's cat. To describe how events change when they are observed. In effect, He was taking the secret society's teachings about everyday experience and applying them to the subatomic realm. At some point in childhood, we all wonder whether a tree falling really makes any sound if it takes place in a remote forest where no one is there to hear it. I hate that analogy, it's so overused. Surely, we say, a sound not heard by anyone can't properly be described as a sound. Secret societies teach that something like this speculation is true. According to them, a tree only falls over in a forest, however remote, so that someone somewhere at some time is affected by it. Nothing happens anywhere in the cosmos except in interaction with the human mind. In Schrodinger's experiment, a cat sits in a box with radioactive material that has a 50% chance of killing the cat. I always hate that part. Both the cat's being dead and its being alive remain 50% probabilities, suspended in time, as it were, until we open the box to see what's inside, and only then does the actual event, the death or survival of the cat, happen. By looking at the cat, we kill or save it. The secret societies have always held that the everyday world behaves in a similar way. In the universe of the secret societies, a coin flipped many times in strict laboratory conditions will still land heads up in 50% of cases and tails up in 50% of cases according to the laws of probability. That's so true. I'm literally taking statistics right now. That is true. That's cool. However, these laws will remain invariable only in laboratory conditions. In other words, the law of probability only apply when all human subjectively has been deliberately excluded. In the normal run of things, when human happiness and hopes for self-sufficient depend on the outcome of the roll of the dice, then the laws of the probability are bent. The deeper laws come into play. Then deeper laws come into play. These days, we are all comfortable with the fact that our emotional states affect our bodies, and further, that deep-seated emotions can cause long-term, deep-seated changes, either to heal or to harm, psychosomatic effects. But in the universe that this book describes, our emotional states directly affect matter outside our bodies too. In the psychosomatic universe, the behavior of physical objects in space is directly affected by mental states without our having to do anything about it. We can move matter by the way we look at it. In Chronicles Volume 1, Bob Dylan's recently published memoirs, he writes about what has to happen if an individual is to change the times in which he or she lives. To do this, you've got to have power and dominion over the spirits. I had done it once, he writes, that such individuals are able to see into the heart of things, the truth of things, not metaphorically either, but really see, like seeing into metal and making it melt. See it for what it is, with hard words and vicious insight. Note that he emphasizes he is not talking metaphorically. He is talking directly and quite literally about a powerful ancient wisdom preserved in the secret societies, a wisdom in which the great artists, writers, and thinkers who have forged our culture are steeped. At the heart of this wisdom is the belief that the deepest springs of our mental life are also the deepest springs of the physical world. Because in the universe of the secret societies, all chemistry is psychochemistry, and the ways in which the physical content of the universe responds to the human psyche are described by deeper and more powerful laws than the laws of material science. It is important to realize that by these deeper laws are meant more than the mere runs of the lack that gamblers experience or accidents seeming to happen in sequence of three. No, by these laws the secret societies mean laws that weave themselves into the warp and weft of each individual life, at the most intimate level, as well as the great and complex patterns of providential order that have shaped the history of the world. The theory of this book is that events we usually explain in terms of politics, economics, or natural disaster can more profitably be seen in terms of other more spiritual patterns. All the upside down, inside out, other way around thinking of the secret societies, all that is bizarre and mind-bending in what follows stems from the belief that mind preceded matter. We have almost no evidence to go on when we decide what we believe happened at the beginning of time, but the choice we make has massive implications for our understanding of the way the world works. If you believe that matter came before mind, you have to explain how a chance coming together of chemicals creates consciousness. Yeah, I literally think about that every day. Like that, it can't happen. I'm a scientist and it can't happen. So, mind came before matter. There you go. Secret societies are right. For some reason, they don't want us to know. Let's keep reading. This is a Mona Lisa smiling with a mustache. This book's pretty cool because it has pictures. Just saying. I mean, I'm trying to show you guys all the pictures. But, okay. Luke, L-H-O-O-Q. Luke. Manifest Dada by Marcel Duchamp, reproduced in the book Surrealism, and painting by Andre Breton. The notion that the physical world responds to our inner desires and fears is a difficult and perhaps somewhat troubling one that we will keep returning to in order to try to understand it better. In 1933, Andre Breton, a devotee of the philosophy of the secret societies, said something very wonderful that has illuminated art and sculpture ever since, and never more so that in any case with the ready-mades of Duchamp, any piece of Flotsam or Jetsam within our grasp should be considered as a precipitate of our desire, which is difficult. If, on the other hand, you believe that matter is precipitated by a cosmic mind, you have the equally difficult problem of explaining how, of providing a working model. Okay, so basically there's a little insert under that picture of the Mona Lisa smiling with a little mustache there. And I read that to you guys, and then I went back to the passage from the page before. So, remember when I told you guys I think about this every day? It's an issue? Okay, here we are. If you believe that matter came before mind, you have to explain how a chance coming together of chemicals creates consciousness. Look. No. If you believe that matter came before mind, you have to explain how a chance coming together of chemicals creates consciousness, which is difficult. If, on the other hand, you believe that matter is precipitated by a cosmic mind, you have the equally difficult problem of explaining how, of providing a working model. From the priests of the Egyptian temples to today's secret societies, from Pythagoras to Rudolf Steiner, the great Austrian initiate of the late 19th to early 20th century, this model has always been conceived of as a series of thoughts emanating from the cosmic mind. Pure mind to begin within these thought emanations later became a sort of proto-matter energy that became increasingly dense, then became matter so ethereal that it was finer than gas, without particles of any kind. Eventually, the emanations became gas, then liquid, and finally solids. Kevin Wardick is professor of cybernetics at Reading University and one of the world's leading creators of artificial intelligence. Working in friendly rivalry with his contemporaries at MIT in the United States, he has made robots able to interact with their environment, learn, and adjust their behavior accordingly. These robots exhibit a level of intelligence that matches that of the lower animals such as bees. I was under the impression bees were pretty intelligent. Well, I guess maybe artificial intelligence would be too. Bees. Within 5 years, he says, robots will have achieved the level of intelligence of cats, and in 10 years, they will be at least as intelligent as humans. He is also in the process of engineering a new generation of robotic computers he expects to be able to design and manufacture other computers, each level generating the lesser level beneath it. According to the cosmologists of the ancient world and the secret societies, emanations from the cosmic mind should be understood in the same way as working downwards in a hierarchy from the higher and more powerful and pervasive principles to the narrower and more particular, each level creating and directing the one below it. These emanations have also always been thought of as in some sense personified, as being in some sense also intelligent. When I saw Kevin Warwick present his findings to his peers at the Royal Institute in 2001, he was criticized by some for suggesting that his robots were intelligent, and so by implication conscious. But what is undeniably true is that these robots' brains grow in something like an organic way. They form something very like personalities, interacting with other robots, and make choices beyond anything that has been programmed into them. Kevin argued that while his robots might not have consciousness, with all the characteristics of human consciousness, neither do dogs. Dogs are conscious in a doggy way. And his robots, he said, are conscious in a robotic way. Of course, in some ways, such as the ability to make massive mathematical calculations instantly, robots display a consciousness that is superior to our own consciousness. We might think of the consciousness of the We might think of the consciousness of the emanations from the cosmic mind in similar terms. We may also be reminded of the Tibetan spiritual masters who are said to be able to. Sorry, guys. Okay, it's not awful. We might think of the conscious mind of emanations from the cosmic mind in similar terms. We may also be reminded of the Tibetan spiritual masters who are said to be able to perform a type of thoughts called tulpas. By intense concentration and visualization, these beings, we might call them thought beings, attain some sort of independent life and go off and do their master's bidding. Tulpas are supposed to be more like an imaginary creature that you create with your mind to like guard your home. It could be like a wolf or something of that nature. Entire chapter on tulpas. Well, the chapter focuses on like creating things with your mind, things like tulpas in my quantum sorcery book. I love that book. Anyway, maybe we'll read that book sometime during bedtime with Luna the Eldest Witch. We might think of the consciousness of emanations from the cosmic mind in similar terms. We may also be reminded of Tibetan spiritual masters who are said to be able to form a type of thoughts called tulpas by intense concentration and visualization. These beings, we might call them thought beings, attain some sort of independent life and go off and do their master's bidding. Similarly, Paracelsus, the 16th century Swiss magus, wrote about what he called an aquastur, a being formed by the power of concentrated imagination, which may obtain a life of his or her own, and in special circumstances become visible, even tangible. At the lowest level of the hierarchy, according to the ancient and secret doctrine in all cultures, these these emanations, these thought beings from the cosmic mind, interweave so tightly that they create the appearance of solid matter. Today, if you wanted to find language to describe this strange phenomena, you might choose to look to quantum mechanics. but in the secret societies, the interweaving of invisible forces to create the appearance of the material world has always been conceived of as a net of light and color, or, to use an alchemical term, the matrix. It's really funny that they said that about quantum physics because, like I just said in quantum sorcery, they talked about tulpas. We might have to read that for story time. I like to switch books. Like, I don't know if we're gonna be able to read The Secret History of the World every story time, like in a row. Anyway, they like to call it the Matrix. The top scientist asks, is life all just a dream? This headline ran in the Sunday Times in February 2005. The story was that Sir Martin Rees, Britain's astronomer royal, was saying over a few decades computers have evolved from being able to simulate only very simple patterns to being able to create virtual worlds with a lot of detail. If that trend were to continue, then we can only imagine computers which will be able to simulate worlds perhaps even as complicated as the one we think we're living in. This raises the philosophical question: could we ourselves be in such a simulation? And could what we think is the universe be some sort of vault of heaven rather than the real thing? In a sense, we could ourselves be the creations within that simulation. I'm kind of tired of the "are we in a simulation" topic. I've listened to so many physicists like debate it. Just like while I'm on my motorcycle riding back and forth to school, I put that on my headphones. I'm very tired of the "are we in a simulation." Anyway, the wider story was that leading scientists around the world are becoming increasingly fascinated by the extraordinary degree of featuring that has been necessary for us to evolve. This is making the question, what is really real? As well as these recent developments in science, novels and movies have gone some way to acclimating us to the idea that what we routinely take to be reality might be a virtual reality. Philip K. Dick, who was perhaps the first writer to seed these ideas into pop culture, was steeped into enigmatic wisdom regarding altered states and parallel dimensions. His novel Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep was filmed as a Blade Runner. Other films with this theme include Minority Report, also based on a book by Dick's, Total Recall, The Truman Show, and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, but the biggest has been The Matrix. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is my favorite. I resonate with Clementine so much. Like, my hair is what my personality is in that any given time. I don't even care. I love Eternal. Oh my gosh. Anyway, The Matrix. I haven't seen The Matrix. Menacing, shade-wearing villains police the virtual world we call reality in order to control us for their own nefarious purposes. In part, at least, this is an accurate reflection of the teachings of the mystery schools and secret societies. Although all the beings that live behind the veil of illusion are part of the hierarchies of emanations from the mind of God, some display a disturbing moral ambience. They are the same beings that the peoples of the ancient world experienced as their gods, spirits, and demons. The fact that some leading scientists are again beginning to see possibilities in this very ancient way of looking at the cosmos is an encouraging sign. Although modern sensibility has little patience with metaphysics, with what might look high-minded, wretched abstractions piled up on each other, Their cosmology of the ancient world was, as any fair historian of ideas will allow, a magnificent philosophical machine, in its accounts of interlocking, evolving dimensions that clashing, morphing, and intermingling of great systems in its scale, complexity, and awesome explanatory power. It rivals modern science. I'm getting tired, guys. This is why I'd like someone to read to me. I bet you guys are asleep by now. Just means you'll have to rewatch tomorrow. Anywho, we cannot simply say that physics has replaced metaphysics and made it redundant. There's a key difference between these systems, which is that they are explaining different things. Modern science explains how the universe comes to be as it is. Ancient philosophy of the kind we will be explaining in this book explains how our experience of the universe comes to be as it is. For science, the great miracle to be explained in the is the physical universe. For esoteric philosophy, the greater miracle is human consciousness. Scientists are fascinated by the extraordinary series of balances between various sets of factors that had been necessary in order to make life on Earth possible. They talk in terms of balances between heat and cold, wetness and dryness, the Earth being so far from the Sun and no further, the Sun being at a particular stage of evolution, neither hotter nor colder. At a more fundamental level, in order for matter to cohere, the forces of gravity and electromagnetism must each be a particular degree, neither stronger nor weaker, and so on and so forth. Looked at from the point of view of esoteric philosophy, we can begin to see that an equally extraordinary series of balances has been began to see. We can be Looked at from the point of view of esoteric philosophy, we can begin to see that an equally extraordinary series of balances has been necessary to make our subjective consciousness what it is. In other words, to give our experience the structure it has. By balances, I'm talking about more than having a balanced mind in the colloquial sense, that is to say, of having emotions which are healthy and not too strong. I'm talking of something deeper, something essential. What, for example, is needed to make possible the internal narrative, the collective of stories we string together to form our ballistic sense of self? The answer is, of course, memory. It is only of remembering what I did yesterday that I can identify myself as the person who did these things. The key point is that in a particular degree of memory that is needed, neither stronger nor weaker, the Italian novelist Italo Calvino, one of the many modern writers who have followed the ancient and mystical philosophy, puts it precisely: memory has to be strong enough to enable us to act without forgetting what we wanted to do, to learn without ceasing to be the same person, but it also has to be weak enough to allow us to keep moving into the future. Other balances are necessary in order for us to be able to think freely, to weave thoughts around that central sense of self. We have to be able to perceive the outside world through the senses, but it is equally important for us not to be overwhelmed by sensations, which could otherwise occupy all our mental space. Then we could neither reflect nor imagine. That this balance holds is as extraordinary in its way as, for example, the fact that our planet is neither too far from nor too close to the sun. We also have the ability to move our point of consciousness around our interior life, like a cursor or a computer screen. As a result of this, we have the freedom to choose what to think about. If we do not have that right balance of attachment and detachment from our interior impulses as well as from our perceptions of the outside world, then at this very moment you would have no freedom to choose to take your attention away from the page you are looking at now, and no freedom to think about anything else. And so crucially, if the most fundamental conditions of human consciousness were not characterized by this set of exceptionally fine balances, it would not be possible for us to exercise free thought or free will. When it comes to the very highest points of human experience, what the American psychologist Abraham Maslow usually called peak experiences, even finer balances are necessary. For example, we may be required to make decisions at the great turning points of our lives. Again, it is the common, if not universal, human experience that if we try to work out what is the right thing to do with our lives using all our intelligence, if we work at it with a good and whole heart, if we exercise patience and humility, we can just discern the right thing to do. And once we have made the right decision, chosen course of action will probably require all the willpower we are capable of, perhaps for just as long as we are able to bear it. If we are to complete it successfully, this is right at the core of what it means to experience life as a human being. There is no inevitability about our consciousness having the structure that makes possible these freedoms, these opportunities to choose to do the right thing, to grow and develop into good, perhaps even heroic people, unless you believe in Providence. That is to say, unless you believe that it was meant to be. Human consciousness is therefore a sort of miracle. If today we tend to overlook this, the ancients were stirring by the wonder of it, as we are about to see their intellectual leaders track subtle changes in human consciousness with as much diligence as modern scientists track challenges in the physical environment. Their account of history, with its mythical and supernatural happenings, was an account of how human consciousness evolved. Modern science tries to enforce a narrow, reductive view of our consciousness. It tries to convince us of the unreality of elements, even quite persistent elements in experience that it cannot explain. These include the shadowy power of prayer, premonitions, the feeling of being stared at, the evidence for mind reading, out-of-body experiences, meaningful coincidences, and other things swept under the carpet by modern science. And much, much more importantly, science in this reductive mood denies the universal human experience that life has a meaning. Some scientists even deny that the question of whether or not life has meaning is worth asking. We will see in the cosmos of this history that many of the most intelligent people who have ever lived have become devotees of esoteric philosophy. I believe it may even be the case that every intellectual human has tried to find out about it at some time. This is because it is a natural human impulse to wonder if life has a meaning, and esoteric philosophy represents the richest, deepest, most concentrated body of thought on this subject. Before we embark on our narrative, it is vital that we apply one more sharp philosophical distinction to the softer edge of modern scientific thought. Sometimes things go wrong, and life seems pointless. But then at other times, our lives do seem to have meaning. For example, life sometimes seems to have taken a wrong turn. We fail an exam, lose a job, or love affair ends. But then we find our true meteor or true love as a result of this seemingly wrong turn, or it happens that someone decides against boarding a plane, which then crashes. If something like this happens, we may feel as if someone up there is looking after us, that our footsteps have been guided. We may have a heightened sense of the precarious of life, how easily things could have turned out differently had it not been for an almost imperceptible, perhaps otherworldly nudge. Similarly, with the down-to-earth science-oriented part of ourselves, we may see a coincidence as chance coming together of related events. But sometimes deep down we suspect that a coincidence is not a matter of chance at all. In coincidence we sometimes feel we catch a hint, a bit an elusive one of a deep pattern of meaning hidden beyond the muddle of everyday experience. And sometimes people find that just when all hope seems lost, happiness is discovered, the other side of despair, or that inside hatred hides the growing gem of love. For reasons we'll look at later, questions of happiness are those days closely connected with notions of sexual love, so that it is often the experience of falling in love that gives us the sense that this was meant to be. Recently, leading scientists have been widely quoted as boasting that science is on the brink of discovering the explanation for, or meaning of, everything in life and the universe. This is usually in relation to string theory, a theory, they say, shortly to be formulated of all the forces of nature, which will combine the laws of gravity with the physics of the quantum world. We will then be able, I love string theory, it's my favorite. We will then be able to relate the reasonable laws that govern objects we can see with the very different behavior of phenomena in the subatomic realm. Once this has been formulated, we will understand everything there is to be understood about the structure, origin, and future of the cosmos. We will have accounted for everything there is because they say there is nothing else. Before we can learn the secrets of the initiates and begin to understand their strange beliefs about history, it's important to be clear about the distinction between meaning as it is used in connection with questions about the meaning of life and meaning as scientists are here using it. A boy arranges to meet his girlfriend for a date, but she stands him up. He's hurt and angry. He wants to understand the painful things that happened to him. When he tracks her down, he interrogates her. His repeated question is why? Because I missed my bus, she says. Because I was late leaving work. Because I was distracted and didn't notice the time. Because I'm unhappy about something. And so he presses and presses until he gets what he's after, sort of. Because I don't want to see you anymore. And we ask why. It can be taken in two ways, either as in the girl's first evasive answers as meaning the same as how, that is to say, requiring answers which give an account of a sequence of cause and effect of atomic knocking against atom, or alternatively, why can be taken in the way the boy wanted to be answered, which is a matter of trying to winkle out intention. Similarly, when we ask about the meaning of life and the universe, we're not really asking how it came about in the cause and effect sense of how that right elements and conditions came together to form matter, stars, planets, organic matter, and so on. We're asking about the intention behind it all. So the big why questions, why life, why the universe, as a matter of quite elementary philosophical distinction cannot be answered by scientists, or merely accurately not by scientists acting in their capacity as scientists. If we ask why are we here, we may be far off with answers which, like the girl's early answers, are perfectly valid in the sense of being grammatically correct answers to the question, but which leave a twist of disappointment in the pit of the stomach because they don't answer the question in the way that deep down we wanted it answered. The fact is that we all have a deep-seated, perhaps indictatable longing for such questions to be answered at the level of intention. The scientists who don't grasp this distinction, however brilliant they are as scientists, are philosophical morons. Obviously, we can choose to give parts of our lives purpose and meaning, If I chose to play soccer, then kicking the ball into the back of that net means a goal. But our lives as a whole, from birth to death, cannot have meaning without a mind that existed beforehand to give it meaning. The same is true of the universe. So when we hear scientists talk about the universe as meaningful, wonderful, or mysterious, or should bear in mind that they may be using these words with a certain amount of intellectual dishonesty. An atheistic universe can only be meaningful, wonderful, or mysterious in a secondary and rather disappointing sense. In the same sense that a stage conjurer is said to be magic, and really, when it comes to considering the great questions of life and death, all the equations of science are little more than difficult and long-winded ways of saying we don't know. That's true. Kind of. We know some things. Not many. Today we are encouraged to put aside the big questions of life and death. Why are we here? Don't know that one. What is the meaning of life? Don't know that one. Such questions are strictly meaningless, we are told. Just get on with it. And so we lose some of the sense of how strange it is to be alive. This book has been written in the belief that something valuable is in danger of being snuffed out altogether, and that as a result we are less alive than we used to be. That's very true. Very, super, very true. Which is why I'm so happy that you guys are in this Illust family with me, taking our spiritual journey together. Even though you're probably sleeping on me right now. I know you're going to watch this later. Because my Illust family is the best. I am suggesting that if we look at the basics of the human condition from a different angle, we may appreciate that scientists doesn't really know as much as it claims to know. Science, that's why. I am suggesting that if we look at the basics of the human condition from a different angle, we may appreciate that science doesn't really know as much as it claims to know, that it fails to address what is deepest and highest in human experience. In the next chapter, we will begin to imagine ourselves into the minds of the initiates of the ancient world and to see the world from their perspective. We will consider ancient wisdom we have forgotten and see that this form its perspective even those things which modern science encourages us to think of as most solidly, reliably true, are really just a matter of interpretation, little more than a trick of the light. And I got a little picture here of a perspective picture which may be seen either as a witch. I am Luna, the Illust Witch. Okay, a witch or a young woman in a feathered hat, depending on your predisposition. Alright, guys, so that was chapter 1 of The Secret History of the World by Mark Booth. Don't mind how used my copy looks. I actually got this copy used by somebody else for $1.99 before I read it the first time. And now I'm reading it again with you guys because I was going to read it again anyway. I thought how great it would be if somebody would just read it to me while I'm going to sleep as a bedtime story. So that's what I'm doing for you. Alright guys, this was Adult Bedtime Stories with Luna the Illust Witch. Please push that subscribe button if you are not already a member of the Illust family, and please ring that bell so that you don't miss my next video. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Next time on Adult Storytime with Luna the Illust Witch, we'll be reading Chapter 2, A Short Walk in the Ancient Woods, imagining ourselves into the minds of the ancients. Pretty excited for that. Let me know in the comments if you think we should also read the introduction, which would be before the first chapter that we read today. I don't feel like you needed much more context than where we started, but let me know if you want to hear it. Other than that, somehow it took us an hour. I just wanted to read clearly for you guys. So, thank you so much for watching, guys. Sweet dreams if you're not already sleeping. And as always, remember, if it harms none, do what you will. Thanks, guys.